And Derrek's like, I'm gonna hold a flash, we flash left side, and then we'll clear side together. And obviously they see Leaf or hear him going into that corner. Okay, I'm gonna aftershock him, I'm gonna walk up. Just like the constant communication is so perfect in that call. That was really nice to hear. And then like in this scenario, it's like, okay, he's outstand, so it's 1, 2, 3, just double peek him. I feel like the communication between these guys is like, if you were to show a brand new team that was coming up in tier 3, tier 2, what good communication between teammates should be like, it'd be those last like 20, 30 seconds.
And I'm not going to be one to say like, oh, your brain is literally suboptimal. Why? You know what I'm saying? Like, look at this. Look at this. Watch this. Look at that double.
Yeah,
look at that double. Look at where the people are.
And then this kill. And then the end of the round is nightmare fuel, but pretty decent spot so far.
Well, what are you laughing about here, James?
Mike's comment.
He knows.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to Valoranting with Vansilli, Anderzz, and Tanner Metro. This is going to be a little bit of a change this time around. Big shout out to Daniel, our producer, for this idea. We decided to bring along here coach of 100Ts or analyst. I don't know what the fuck your title is, Mikes, but you're coming on the show. And then we got JamezIRL, formerly of Cloud9, to come on the show with us to talk about a head-to-head matchup about their lower bracket game in the semifinals, an elimination game during the LCQ. So C9 coming in as the winners of 2021 LCQ, getting dethroned by 100Ts. I'm going to preface that just to say, James, how's it going, brother?
Yeah, I mean, that is what happened, so that's a fact. I like dealing in facts, so I'm pretty happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Mike, how are you doing today, brother?
Doing good. Thanks for the introduction. Were you workshopping that one before or after the spike rush until 5 a.m.?
I should have taken that break to actually figure out how I want to do the introduction instead of like copy-pasting what my 60, 20 wins, 40 losses, and spike rushes were to try to get the battle pass done. But we got it done, guys. We got it fucking done. But let's get into it, man. I think this is going to be really fun to like dive deeper into your brains around the preparation that came about this matchup that was super important, of course, during the LCQ to have a shot to play and represent North America into the Masters/Champion stage. So with further ado, let's get into this, man. I want to first go on and talk about the agent composition, starting off with you, James, because I think this is one interesting composition to look at for Cloud9. This is a comp where you guys went double controller with an Omen and a Viper. You had a Raze in there and a Chamber, but you weren't using a lot of like the KO or the Breach that's like almost a must-have for a lot of the fan base that watches matches on Fracture. So I wanted to know your thought process into like the pros and cons and how you want to take advantage of the strengths of this composition.
Yeah, I always think like common knowledge about comps and stuff is it's whatever. I feel like everyone should just think about it for themselves. But I think this comp is definitely viable. Usually when you see double controller on attack side, you can play the rounds out a little longer and have more control just by the nature of how it works. And then Breach is obviously OP on this map, whatever that means. You know, it's hard to quantify what these words mean. But I think you can get a lot done with Fade, and you don't necessarily have to explode on things if you have double controllers. You don't need the Breach. Obviously, if a team knows that we're not going to play Breach, then it opens up other agents for them. But you know, it's hard for people to bank on stuff like that. When I looked back at this matchup, I don't necessarily think the game was won or lost based on the comp. Like a lot of the rounds come down to like really sick plays by people, and it was just like a good match. So I'm actually kind of excited to look at it like many months in the future, you know, after playing it, because like I think it's healthy to do things like that in life, you know, take your emotion out of it. So
for sure.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure, man. Looking forward to dive deep into this. And for you, Mike's, the preparation around this for this composition for 100 Thieves on the other end is what we would call a little bit more conservative, right? You have this KO, you have a Breach, maybe not a Neon that a lot of teams have been running overall, but what is the thought process of 100 Thieves going into Fracture on this comp? I guess a composition as well for Fracture for both of you guys, where it's not necessarily a composition to try to anti-strat each other because you have to play and set for a whole weekend of matches with the same comp, most likely.
Yeah, so I mean, going in before we played Neon, but that was the day before we played Sentinels, and I went to like 5 OTs on that map.
Yep.
So you're sitting there thinking like, okay, we just showed everything going into that match, and then I think the comp that C9 runs is really good. Xet runs something similar. FPX I think did at 1.2. A bunch of EMEA teams love it. So you're looking at, you know, Viper. Fade, I think, is actually a really good counter to Neon because the prowess just latch onto you for whatever distance. Hopefully they rework that at some point. But it's kind of like, okay, we got to figure out how to get around some of this annoying stuff so Peter just isn't running through Viper walls and stuff like that. So we decided, okay, we could swap him to Raze. You can use the Boombot to like get info behind the Viper stuff constantly through one-ways. Issue was we obviously had a day in between, so we only had the warm-up scrim to really prac that because we never run this comp before. Obviously, you're only changing the duelist, and Peter's really good on Raze, so we felt pretty confident in it. It was just more a matter of looking through the basic stuff, you know, like we look at, okay, they run Fade, so what are the eyes they like to run, stuff like that.
Make sure to subscribe to Valoranting because they ask some pretty good questions, so you don't want to miss out on the answers.
Well, let's have a look at this pistol run. At the same time, Tanner and Anderzz, I'm gonna have to ask you guys to open the chat up in our call as well, so we can pass along our questions because, you know, little trade secret of how we're able to do these sweet transitions between us three. Pistol round is going underway. As everything was mentioned before here by Mike's James, is that they've showed everything playing a Neon in that previous matchup. This time they're against Sentinels. Now they're coming with a Raze. They're coming with this double flash. What is the reasoning now behind C9 seeing this composition and saying, oh shit, let's actually 5-man hit towards the A-hulls? What are you trying to bait out at this point?
I feel like we would just like to get info as early as possible, as cheaply as possible, with as low of risk, unless somebody wants to go for a pick. So that's what we're doing here. We feel like it's a nice way of opening the roundup. Interestingly enough, this happens, which is a perfect example of even if you can prep for something, you don't necessarily always know when it's going to happen. We knew that Stellar likes to play on sites with KO, like bottom site A, like they like to put him on a site, and he still plays it to a T. So this round Stellar just goes hard, you know, like that has not very much to do with comp. I mean, obviously it's good for KO to do that, but like this was just a play that somebody made, right? Like
For sure.
I would say the reason why we're emboldened to go fast towards A-hulls, you know, we're obviously going to take into account their composition in the moment, but it's not like we have like 4 different defaults cooked up in case they don't play Neon and they play Raze, right? Like you kind of rely on your players to have a brain and be able to solve, you know, solve all those things in the moment. So comp and all those prep things only goes so far, you know, you need to play the game.
For sure.
So I just want to go back to, so in a perfect world, obviously Xeppaa dying at the beginning, that sucks because now you're pretty, like, your consistent info because that eye is going to be coming back online is gone right at the start because of the paint shells here. And Leaf has a boombot, so obviously you're not on the server with them telling them what to do, but in a perfect world, Leaf boombots, you know, bottom a site. Was there ever a conversation or a thought back to this and not using that utility and kind of just dying for free? Or is this just, like you said, one of those rounds where you just shake it off because you're like, well, fucking Stellar did Stellar things?
They're contacting out, they're making the decision in the moment, and it could go well, right? Like they very easily could have got this kill had he been looking there. Like it just is a play that goes one way or the other.
Okay.
You know?
I think the walkout's a really good call in a 4v4. We're probably playing like most people in a 4v4 on defense are going to go into like a standard 2 on each site. So contact out, you catch Stellar, maybe he pulls a piece of util out or he's not watching that angle, then you're in a 4v3, only one other guy in that area. So I like the contact out. Obviously didn't work out because we had been playing people on sites more often, like James already mentioned, but yeah.
That's super interesting. So I'm going to take the exact opposite angle on that. Because James, you had mentioned that like you knew Stellar wanted to, like, he had a propensity to play these like on-site lower A sunk cost positions where you're sitting on full suite of Raze util. Like, why is there not a boombot there? Is that like a conscious decision where you're opting into the contact play instead for a specific reason? Because like you had Raze nade and boombot to like full flush lower side if that's something you knew was potentially there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like you said, we're not in the moment
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
The
of
players have
course.
to make a decision.
Mm.
Like and I'm not gonna be one to say like, oh, your brain is literally suboptimal. Like, why? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like if a player ever thinks you're like coming at them like that, like they're not gonna want to
It's just
ever
a
hear
hostile
your
environment.
You're
opinion
not coaching
ever
for a while.
again.
Yeah.
Like, you have to like, even if you watch yourself play, like everyone's making mistakes all the time, and like it's really hard to like say when somebody isn't making mistakes, right? Because like sometimes there is a benefit to playing slightly more alpha in certain situations, and it's like, where do you draw the line between mistake or not? So it's like, they probably remember hearing the prep about he's on the bottom site, and I'm not gonna for every piece of prep, I'm not going to be like, all right, when we're in this situation, make sure you use this utility,
Right.
like because of this, because there's not only one bullet point of prep. There's many bullet points of prep. That's one of them. You hope people keep it in mind. I'm not saying this like we made a mistake. I'm telling you guys the truth of the situation is
For
like,
sure. For sure.
you
Yeah.
can't jam people up about like small decisions like this, because like they're going to be their own worst enemy. Like, in my opinion, I think the best players in the world are the players who are very self-critical, because they're already unconsciously doing that. Every time they die, they're probably like, ooh, what could I have done better? So
Yeah.
like,
Lit-
I don't know, I don't really have much more to say about this
No, for
situation, to be
sure.
honest.
Really feels like the Tom Cruise style that we always talk that I always talk about. He dies and comes back and is always learning every single time he's facing that situation
Yeah.
again. How can
Yeah.
he do things and upgrade? And speaking of though, enabling players and whatnot, going back to one more question about that pistol round for me is maybe Asana's paint shells going into A main after he boombots, right? So
Yeah.
boombot opening the door, Asana gets into the door, nades and does a lot of damage. And for me here to ask you the question, Mikes, is how much are you enabling Asana in the game plan overall? Because the storyline around 100 Thieves in the past was like, oh, it's always Dicey and Asana, the Zoomers, let them open up, and then once they die, let's let the Boomers clean up. Is that still the same type of like train of thought, seeing how Asana is currently playing in this new roster, if I could put it that way?
I don't think it's remotely close to that. I think for me, when I'm designing things, I'm always thinking about how can I play to people's strengths, and this is something that teams that scrimmed us know. Derrek and Asana controlling A main, that's like their bread and butter before we started playing Neon and even after. So it's just kind of like, okay, this is our highest value impact, is those two controlling A main. They have really good synergy together. Is it going to be pretty all the time or the most effective util? No, but at the same time, he gets so much chip damage here, gets one kill. There is a world where he kills Mitch there too, gets 5v3 off the rep, maybe gets out, but I feel like playing to players' strengths is ultimately like the end goal, and not focusing on like, okay, he's a duelist, everything we do must center around him, or he's a star player, everything we must do must center around him. I think each player has to be valuable in their role at any point in the round.
Well, let's get into that then. Playing to their strengths, right? You guys have won pistol round here for 100 Thieves. You've won the second round against the Eco, that C9 head. Then you get into your bonus round in round number 3. And playing to that strength, is it more with the lower rifles that you had too to try to work out a plan? Is there a protocol around that as to when you're running your strats or when you're prepping into a map, what is going to happen round 3? Should A, we win the round and play the bonus, or 2, we've lost a round and we're going into a gun round against a bonus? Do you have 2 different scenarios for that round number 3?
Yeah, I mean,
Who are
we're
you
thinking.
okay.
I think he was going towards me, but we
Yeah,
can
I'll
probably
pass
both
and I'll pass
answer.
the question to James after for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so,
My bad.
So, I mean, we always have like ideas for what we want to do for the bonus round. This is just something super simple. At the start of the round, we'll impede a dish, or Asana, sorry, always have that habit. But, and then there's playing he TPs out eventually, and then hopefully they don't clear Asana in the corner after he TPs out, because they figure most people just make a lot of assumptions that, okay, Chamber TP'd out of this area, we probably have it for free now. That's just something that people kind of have as a protocol in their mind. Now the space is open. I think he jumps down a bit here early because he feels pressure from A main because they started making or throwing util towards spawn. So that was a little bit of unlucky timing. But yeah, you're always thinking about how can you convert this third round, because being up 4-0 is so powerful in MR12.
Yeah, for sure. James, you were going to tag on to that as well. What were you going to mention about your gun round versus 100 Thieves' bonus?
I actually think what they did here was kind of nifty. Like they breach stun B stairs, but they set up like their fight somewhere else. So I thought this was hard to read. So it was a good strat by them. Good small simple thing, right? Like it doesn't have to be like the craziest idea in the world to have good impact. And even though we didn't fall into the trap, they gave themselves a good chance to win the round. So I think that's all you can really do is set yourself up for success.
For sure.
And this round specifically, the first buy for Cloud9 is very slow. Obviously, it's the start of the game. We've only played a couple of rounds, but it's very slow. Were you able to pick up on any tendencies from 100 Thieves in, like maybe like Asuna getting a little antsy, or is that something that you were kind of expecting coming into this matchup?
Well, I'll put it this way. So pro players know the player personality of each other, especially if it's within a region. Like all the guys on both of these teams kind of know how the guys on each of these teams play more or less, right? Aside from that, we detail rounds that we've seen often and all right, you see this, like cool, like get it in your mind so you can come up with a good reaction, or let's talk about one now. But yeah, in general, we're gonna play a slower style with our comp, especially against their gun type, right? Like we don't want to be having any untradeable deaths, right? That's probably number one on a round like this. And you want to like favor the fights for yourself. So like just don't do anything unnecessary. You have double controller and you're against like a suboptimal buy. Like most of what they're doing should not catch you off if you have the attention span. So just play the round like that. And then we have a few ideas about how we want to have slow rounds develop, and then people can make adaptations on the fly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed watching about C9 in this game versus 100 Thieves, because I know we talked about the composition at the beginning of the game, and of this game, and we talked about how you don't have like the big flashers, with the exception of Vanity's big paranoia. Then you have to go with a lot of these fundamentals of like, okay, retaking space in the mid round, and then double swinging, taking space back together. And I think those type of fundamentals that you see in attack FPS for C9 shines very well. Which is why I definitely see a close game here, and we'll touch on that a lot once we get into these later rounds. And I want to get into those later rounds sooner than later. So let's hop over to round number 6 here, where I want to bring the question over to you, Mikes, where there's always been this storyline around 100 Thieves as to like, oh, Will only bought an operator like twice in the fucking game, or if he's going to play Jett, he's always going to be rifling and stuff like that too. We see definitely a lot more opting for Will on a chamber on this map, but is that also a game plan to not enable Will to op as much in the other maps overall?
It's kind of on a case by case basis, I would say, because there's some maps where, let's say you go out and you lose the first 3 rounds, you get bonus or whatever. It's pretty hard to get an op in your hands at that point. You're going to be struggling the rest of the half. So I think there's a lot of scenarios like that that people overlook. And then sometimes there's just a comp difference. Like this comp is really annoying to op against, I would say. Like you have to deal with the Viper stuff, one ways, lots of people with movement abilities. We get bailed out there pretty easily because that was like an underpass setup that we normally do, where if Pierre's on Neon, he can jump spot tree, and then Will's opping arcade. Luckily, we kind of get bailed out. We still almost flubbed the end of the round here to Mitch, but I thought he was pretty close to winning that.
That's interesting, actually, as you're talking about the double controller. I think that's also that game plan to try to not allow any oppers on the defense or even on the attack to get a good positioning here, James, for the team, and you can maybe exploit that a little bit more.
Yeah. I think something we could have done better, now that I'm looking at this again, is or a different game plan, not necessarily better, but another viable game plan would be to like have more consistent arcade pressure, because like they feel really comfortable playing arcade early in the half, I've noticed. And like even though we get this 1-for-1 or whatever, we get doubled here, he wouldn't feel this bold to go through the wall like this. Like this setup is so hard for us to trade out against an op. Like
Yeah.
I mean, even if he doesn't get 2 there, like it's still sick. And like I guess if our game plan was a little bit different, then they wouldn't have such a sick setup there. I think arcade's like a really interesting part of the map because if you look at retakes on this site, if the defending team, the team that's retaking B, doesn't have arcade, and then the like attackers have that three-way crossfire from stairs, arcade, and tower or site, like it's pretty effed for the defenders.
Yeah.
So I think arcade's like a really important part of the map.
Yeah. And
Very important.
actually, yeah, and moving on into round number 7, or just looking at that arcade position in general, because Curry sets up that wall pretty much every single round on the attack too. And of course, there's one mentioning into conditioning. The second one is, as you just mentioned, into the terms of a retake towards that B site. But overall, what is the idea of C9 on the attack site, not even taking arcade that many times, despite the wall always going up on that arcade position throughout this game? Was it like trying to pivot the A site, rotate, and just hit A on the weaker site? What was the game plan around that wall conditioning on the attack from Curry?
I don't want to over talk again because Mike hasn't gotten to talk. We were missing this round, but it's basically just how the players feel based on what we've done in previous matches. Because we've ran this comp before in a recent match. We didn't change comp, but we had different style of starting rounds, and other times it was starting heavy arcade. So we're just kind of keeping people on their toes as to like how we're gonna play.
And I guess now, as James was alluding here to you, Mikes, is there anything that you were seeing as the analyst here for the team, figuring out what they were trying to do around the Viper wall on arcade a lot?
Again, I think it's just pretty annoying to deal with. We kind of talked about it going into the match because it entirely changes where you can place the chamber trips, stuff like that. So we also felt like Raze might be a better pick because it's if that wall's up in the mid round, maybe you can boom bot, reclear arcade, something like that. Raze nade behind it to deny them space, just little things like that. That makes it pretty annoying. And obviously then, again, going back to the op comment, can't exactly get op lines all the time because they could be crossing under, they could be in the cubby, could be behind the box, just makes it really annoying. But we felt like overall in a lot of these rounds after the first two was a lot of not playing our game as much and keeping map control. We felt like this comp that they run is really good at denying info, taking space, so it's kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts. And at any time they can do something explosive like this. So Belief goes out. Lots of players just over peak there. He does a really good job of staying alive so his teammates can collapse on them. And then both of our guys are just kind of caught out in the open thinking they're going to get a kill. But yeah, that's kind of like the basis of it with their wall. It's just this map too on defense, you have to be so good about maintaining some amount of space. You can't retake from spawn 24/7. You can't play on the sites 24/7. So
So I'm glad you mentioned that because that was going to be my question. This round specifically, the three remaining your B side players, they all rotate and come through spawn. And obviously Rolling Thunder available. That's maybe one of the better angles to be coming from because you do hit so much from that. But this is kind of a question for both of you holistically on Fracture. Mike, I'll start with you. How important is it to kind of retake or play around these extremities when you are retaking a site? And are there things where, like in this round, you have that Rolling Thunder, so you say, okay, let's go through spawn and we attack this way, right? What are kind of some of the factors that change maybe what your idea of always playing extremities on retake versus playing through spawn?
Sure. So I think it kind of depends on obviously what util you have left, what comp you have, what type of buy they're on. Again, we threw in some stuff this event because we noticed that in VODs, a lot of teams weren't using util to clear sites. That's why we had like Eden playing on site. Obviously, Chamber can play on at any time and get out. But generally, we feel like at least on retaking, you have to flank a lot. So at the start of this round, something that we could like nitpick in this VOD would be like, okay, we killed the Chamber. He's holding the flank after the round. We could probably collapse on that with having one or two guys flank and then the spawn guy waits. But obviously, it's just kind of like James was saying earlier, players make decisions. You have to have faith in those decisions when they happen. But yeah, I think overall, playing around the extremities is a lot more consistent value just because a lot of the spaces that attackers can play from and just play post plant from the mains, you can get the site most of the time. Like you can play retake A, they'll let you out spawn, they play for main and dish, and then it's like, okay, they're Brim Molly, now we're getting Flash, now we're getting Neon stunned, whatever. Just makes it really hard. So I feel like the quadrants of the map are always really important to play around, especially on retake.
And James, do you share that same sentiment? Do you have like specific protocols where you do think pushing through spawn all together is better than playing the extremities?
Pushing through spawn altogether is better than
Like,
playing any of
yeah,
the
like
extremities.
retaking through spawn.
If we have a specific plan for it, I don't know. I feel like thinking like that is like overly simplistic. It's like if you just play the situation in a winnable way and you honestly think it's winnable, then it's justifiable, and that's what matters, right? It's not like, hey guys, let's brainstorm ways of playing only from spawn today. I feel like that's like overly simplistic view, but like I think another thing is like, let's say that you lost a winnable round from a scrim and you happen to be playing spawn and you're just like, hey, how could we have played this better? And then that way you're like naturally coming up with like solutions rather than protocols. I feel like protocols are like is like a word that triggers me because it makes it seem like everyone like memorizes these like rules by which to win. And it's like it's not like that. Like I don't know.
That's interesting.
Like there's many roads to Rome. There's many like ways to win around, and it's like you just have to like be smart about it. Is like the best way of saying it. Because like you can definitely play all from spawn on defense if you have a good plan. Like if I put my Viper wall across tower and account for arcade side, and then we do something to account for stairs. Like it's totally viable. But to like say it's always or this or that, like I don't know. I think people should get out of the mind of protocols, to be honest.
That's super
You're gonna add
interesting
something,
to me.
Anderzz? Go ahead.
Yeah. So conceptually, like I'm very much so of the same mind where like I would never deal in absolutes, but I think that just based off of the success of repeatable patterns, do you not see value in like very explicit recognition of certain situations and having set reactions to them? Like
Yes, of course. There's certain
okay.
situations. Yes, of course. There's like really optimal solutions to things that happen often, and most people know those things, right?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, because
let's say
that's
that
what I consider protocols. So when you're like, "Oh, protocols trigger me," I'm like, "Wait, what?" Where
Yeah,
are we
but
going
it's
with
like,
this?
yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Like, well, can you explicitly say one that you know is like a good one? I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm just like, I want to know like what is a hard and fast rule that somebody can stand behind and actually tell me is a protocol. Like, can can you stand behind it and like
Oh
say
yeah,
like
absolutely. Like
really draw
so.
out the full situation? Because then it's like,
Oh yeah, Icebox is the
like,
map where it's super easy to do it. People say that the map plays super linearly, and I think that it's like that perceived linear nature to the map is actually because of how fleshed out protocols are. Like a double or triple flank push through of A being like a very set defined push protocol was like the crux of why Fnatic was undefeated on it at Champions 2021. That's something that I drilled into them like no tomorrow. Like we even had set op channels where like Durka would scale from pipes. Like I'm not gonna waste it because we're talking about fracture here, but like I'd love to pick your brain offline because like I'm a huge fan of protocols, especially explicitly hashed out ones.
yeah, of course you want specific strats, but it's like I don't think you need them to succeed, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure it was like there's many roads to run, there's many ways to win. And there is a place for protocols, but like I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to see I would like to see what yours are, because like I don't
Yeah,
think it's
for
I
sure.
don't think it's natural to like just have a Rolodex of protocols. That sounds very rigid and like kind of for like noob players, to be honest. Like that's something like it seems weird. But maybe I'm just too noob and I don't understand how to correctly craft them. So
I think
maybe you just need to teach me. I don't think you need to pick my brain.
I think it's neither black nor white sort of thing. I think it's a balance of the two. I think it's important to like have that Rolodex of protocols, but like still have the adaptability and the flexibility and the understanding that like these are dynamic.
Yeah.
You're still going to run into scenarios that don't exist within that Rolodex, but you do have it for when they do happen.
At least
Fair enough.
sometimes when we hear about a lot of protocols as like a fan or somebody who doesn't live and breathe all the strategies around Valorant. I hear protocols, I hear tendencies, right? So to go back into the game here in round number 8, Mike's, this is probably where Sean calls a timeout into the match because, after losing your bonus, he's also lost 3 rounds in a row. And there was, at some moment, you needed to find a way to like stop the hemorrhaging that C9 was starting to come back here on the attack. So what was the conversation going around this timeout? What did you notice that C9 was doing, and what were you trying to explode? Yeah, after this round, the timeout was called here.
Sure. So that's something that we talk about a lot in terms of, okay, have we used up the effectiveness of our game plan at this point? Have they adapted? Obviously, they have a bunch of really smart players on that team, so they don't necessarily need a timeout to adapt to our stuff either. Just the same with our players. We feel like they can adjust on the fly without it. We just kind of went back to what was working at the start. So we switched back to Austin and Derrek working A main. They're just holding it down. And that was one of the main things. We felt like as more time was ticking off the clock, they were winning a lot more, mostly just because they had the entire map, right? So you're just down to playing the sites and spawn, and you don't really have any info or a good setup because, again, bomb sites are really hard to play on. They adjusted pretty well to what util they could use to flush us out of those positions. So that was kind of the main thing. It's like, okay, we need actual map control, protocol type of thing. Like, okay, maybe some of our retakes don't feel good, so we're going to go back to what feels comfortable for us, which is flanking on retakes, taking that map control, catching people off guard. So that was kind of like the basics of the timeout.
Yeah. And then that timeout leads into that round number 9, sorry, because that was the timeout that was called. But I think, James, you took advantage of that timeout to correctly read what was going to happen against 100 Thieves on that round 2, because that round, if I'm not mistaken, was the round where Asuna was going to have, Leaf was going to have the showstopper, and you were trying to hit towards this B site. But the protocol, quote unquote, if I could put it that way, of you guys trying to hit that site was really well done. But the only thing that sucked was that the nades actually didn't land into the boxes of where that I think it was Bang that was playing those green boxes to be able to capitalize on that round.
Yeah, that's my fault. I didn't drill him enough on that hit. So
actually, you know what? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about those drills too, because as much as you guys are putting into a lot of these game plans, right, for getting ready for the matchup, how much then comes into the lab of like, okay, we need to actually practice these satchels. How many hours goes into, especially your duelists such as Asuna, such as Leaf, to be able to land that in the most specific way, in the best timing possible? Because of course, behind all that is all flashes, all utility, all that needs specific timings.
Yeah, so I would say that all of that preparation, like the worrying if somebody has the skill to do the satchel, is like far before this, these matches.
Yeah.
And like if there is a set hit where we have set pathing, for me, they will have drilled it multiple times. I'm not obviously gonna like give up the secret sauce and say the exact schedule. Like that's a whole nother topic. Is like coming on these things for a coach is like a really interesting thing, right? Like how much are you gonna tell everyone? Because it's not like I'm a player where, I still have my ability to play as kind of like my value, but like as a coach coming on something like this, it's like you're basically just giving up your full value to a certain extent.
Gotta protect the brain trust.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just want to say, 20 minutes into this conversation, maybe 30 minutes into this conversation, I am in way over my head. Okay, I just want you guys to know. And if I say something stupid, you can tell me that I said something stupid. Okay, I'm just a lowly play-by-play, and if I offend, then I don't mean to offend.
I respect it, Tanner.
Yeah. So I just want to say, I'm drowning here.
That's the most attractive thing, is when somebody has lost the need to try to stop seeming like an idiot. I feel like that's like ultimate maturity, is when you're no longer afraid to be an idiot.
Yeah.
Okay, so now
he just called you attractive, Tanner.
Hey, James, I don't know. I think we gotta do something offline too, Anderzz.
It's an attractive character trait. I don't know, man. Nothing wrong with that.
I want to ask this, and this is more general, because I saw a tweet the other day, it was during the Game Changer stuff, and it was actually Grego who said, yes, please call tactical timeouts. I love when other coaches give me a time to speak to my players. Is that something that you guys are actually thinking about and taking your tactical timeouts, or I guess we have 3 coaches here that can answer. James, I'll come to you first. You took, I think, one of your 2 timeouts on the whole game, and it wasn't towards the end. When you do and are calling timeouts, are you thinking like, shit, well, I am giving time to the other team to also speak to their players? Or is that just not a thought at all, and you guys are just trying to kind of fix the mistakes that you're making or the tendencies that you're noticing?
Obviously, like what you need is of top priority. So like, let's say the situation where the guys are literally not figuring it out, then I'll call attack, even if that tack will have benefit for the other team,
Mhm.
right? But you're always considering it. You're always considering the value to the other team.
Okay.
100%.
Did you want to pass that question over to Mike's as well, Tanner?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Mike's. I mean, and Anderzz too. If you share the same sentiment, then you share the same sentiment. But I was just wondering if that is like a legitimate thought into, hey, I don't want to take attack because it's going to give them a second too.
Sure.
For-
I mean, I think when it comes to timeout specifically or just play calling or whatever, any part of the game, the thing that we talk to our guys a lot about is we always need to have confidence in what we're doing is ultimately going to be better. Obviously, you need to take into account what adjustments other people are going to make or things they're going to do. But at the end of the day, if you can't be more confident in your own game plan, then I feel like you've already lost the game at that point. You're already a step behind. So I think there's different elements of it. If I know like a team, like let's say they won a really clutch round or something, it's at the end of the game and you know that team specifically, people get really emotional and they get really energetic and stuff. It's like, if our guys are already talking about a good adjustment here, I'm just giving them time to cool down. And obviously it can be a double-edged sword because someone could just be high off adrenaline and just get a 4K. But I think there's different things that you can weigh in there. Like I think at LAN too, that can be a big factor if you're noticing like, okay, they won a clutch round, but they're all standing up and there's like 15 seconds left in freeze time and they still have to set up on defense on like Icebox or something. They might just unravel themselves in a moment like that. So I think there's definitely a lot of different factors to take in there off timeouts, but ultimately having confidence in yourself is the biggest thing.
The way I see it is there's 4 types of tack timeouts that I would ever take as a coach. 2 are psychological. 1 is my team has so much momentum that it's getting away from them. Nobody is keeping the team in check. This is like the classic, I expect an IGL in situations like this to be like, game's not over, take it 1 round at a time type thing. If that sort of check doesn't exist, there will be scenarios where I feel like I need to make that check. Then there's the other psychological one, which is the team is spiraling. I need to rebound their mental. Then you have logistics ones, which are basically what Mike's saying, where it's like, this is only really going to be relevant on LAN. It's like, my team is literally not going to like have time to get their shit together. I need to call this tack so that we can regather ourselves and get a strategy out. And then the 4th one, which is my favorite, is I have a call that is 100% going to convert us around. That's like, it's interesting because like a lot of people, when they think of a coach calling a tactical timeout, they're like, oh, it's tactical. They're just going to give them strategies. Only one of the 4 types actually has to do with tactics and me giving a strategy. And I'm only ever going to call that type if I feel like I literally have the best read on Earth.
And 100 Thieves fucking does that with 100 Thieves, like, hey, tactical timeout. I'm gonna give you the strats for the next 8 rounds. Just fucking win them out, man. I don't know what you guys are cooking up in your timeouts, but it's working.
And that's it, right? Because at that round number 9, that timeout comes out for Sean. There's that discussion, and then 100 Thieves end up winning the last 4 rounds of the half, right? So we're moving into the last round of the half. James, you're sitting on the sidelines right now. What was the conversation on your end, looking at the past 9 rounds, trying to figure out how you could close out the last 4 rounds to the best of your capabilities, and what happens in your mind when at round number 12 it's another round that's lost against 100 Thieves here?
Is the round gonna play? Because
Yeah, we'll
I
have
actually
it up here. Yeah.
Okay. So how do I put this? I mean, what's going on in my mind is a whole different from the players, but in general, I would say that the way I like to set the culture is that you play the round at hand. You just, all you worry about is the situation at hand. Like, I don't care if I've lost 4 in a row. I don't care what the score is. I'm playing these few seconds ahead of me as perfectly as possible. So like, I think that's really important, to just be in that zone, kind of like zenned out. Like I'm just playing it. Like I don't really see the scoreboard.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's certain situations where you need to make a different economic decision based on the scoreboard, but you still play the round. I actually reviewed these rounds today because I knew we were going to be on this show, and like
Yep.
the way that we lost those 4 rounds heading into the half were like really dogfighty. Like there's this one where Bang gets like a double and like randomly doubles a guy, like, and it was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it was like the thing that turned the tide of the round.
Mhm.
So it's like I'm not trying to take away from the narrative of
sure, for
100
sure.
Thieves' timeout excellence, because like their timeout excellence is awesome.
Mhm.
Like they did it on Ascent. Like we were owning them on Ascent. It was like something really high, and then they took a timeout and then just rolled us the rest of the half. So definitely not minimizing that. I'm just saying, like, for players' perspective, you should just play the moment. Like
Yeah.
don't have, it's like betting. Like if you happen to play poker or something like that, like tilting is when your decision on your betting is influenced by the like weird stuff from the past. It's not your play is not based on what's happening now. So you just need to stay in the now.
Yeah.
So
And for you, Mike's looking at even this round number 12 again, where Will just comes out and gets to pick into B main. Is that one of those moments where you're looking at, okay, the comp that we're playing against, and we mentioned at the beginning, there's not too many flashes, and there's not really many things that are just cutting your line of sight for your opper to be able to push forward in those positions. Is that, as an IGL, as a coach, you're like, okay, Will, this is going to be a team where you're going to be able to push a little bit more aggressively and play with that confidence and try to enable him more in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about what spots would probably be better to op in than not based off of like where they put their Viper wall, stuff like that. I think Fade is a really good counter in general to Chamber because the prowers are just so annoying compared to any other utility. Like Raze Boombot, you could take a 50-50, see when it blows up on you if you get the shot off, but Fade prowers are just like, okay, I have to spend so much time shooting this thing or waste my one op shot and then TP out, so it's not really worth it. But yeah, I mean, we focused again on it was just controlling A main, keeping that map control, play on sites when optimal because, like you said, they don't have flashes. We didn't feel like they had a ton of util to clear us out. And something for this series, I would say overall, because I feel like when people talk about timeouts, that the credit like always goes to coaches. I would say for these 2 maps in this series, the players before we called the timeout were already ahead of like what adjustments we should make. Like,
Yeah.
Players are also able to talk in timeouts, like for people that are unaware or don't think about that. But I felt like on this map, Will talked about making the adjustment for A main for having Peter and Derrek fighting there, and then I forget who called it or like was saying it on the attack versus them on Ascent. But yeah, players, especially on our team, I feel like have a lot of value and input on timeouts as well.
For sure. I remember you saying that specifically, and even Dan and Sean were mentioning that, like, post interviews, talking with other people, that your players are just already ahead of the curve, and the timeout was just basically time for you guys to breathe as the coaching staff, right? Because it is stressful moments sitting in the back lines and seeing like your game plan sometimes comes to fruition or just topples down. So I can't imagine how stressful it could be watching these games, especially during the LCQ. But let's move on into at least the second half right now, because if not, we're going to be here until like 8 p.m. And I know people want to
fine
go.
with it.
It's not too bad.
Yeah,
I
right.
gotta pick my kid up from school. So
There you go.
we gotta-
So let's talk about that pistol round actually in round number 13. And again, I'm going to use the coin phrase of protocols too, because I do like how you guys actually got it.
We're actually just gonna maximize how many times we can say protocols for the rest of the podcast, James, just for you.
Yeah, but I do like at least what you guys are doing here for 100 Thieves, Mikes, of like getting into the site actually, because it's the satchels from Sands from Asuna that lands onto the the satchels from here that goes onto the top boxes of Sands as you see right now. But following that, you were mentioning how it's always Derrek and Asuna together. That breach flash from behind, followed by the knife, so that nobody could counter back on utility on Sands, was fucking quite cool, just to garnish that, to gather that space for 100 Thieves to try to get in. For you, James, was this something that was like, holy shit, I've never seen this stuff before, or did it come out of left field when you saw just fucking Asuna satchling on top and seeing these flashes coming out?
I mean, I don't know if I've seen I don't know if I've seen somebody do that. I know Mitch likes to get up on that box. I think we called that Mitch box for a while, but yeah, it's definitely a good route by them. They got a lot of space. They almost timinged Mitch at Dish in the beginning, and then we timinged them coming out the heaven smoke. So, I guess to each their own. And I mean, when I reviewed this round again today, it was just I just wrote down dogfight pistol round.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I think what you said is like they paired the utility and the timing of everything really well, and I think like that's the mark of like a good team that can like come up with quick explodes that are like well pieced together
Yeah.
on the fly.
So I want to. So now that you have taken a look at it, or even in the moment, were you able to pick up on something that you thought 100 Thieves was doing that made it a dogfight? Like, were you like seeing it now? Are you kind of thinking of ways like, what we're 12 rounds into this one? Have you kind of thought coach's brain working? Where you're like, man, if we would have just changed this, then we could have taken some of this dogfight away from 100 Thieves? Because you've mentioned it a couple times now.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. I never really looked at it that way, and that could be a nice way of having a proactive game plan. So no, I didn't think about it that way. That's interesting.
See? Look at that.
Look at that outsider
Look at that,
advantage, Tanner.
Hey,
Look
you're
at
not
that.
doubting
so
anymore.
stupid after all, baby.
Well fucking done. But let's move on right now into the pistols. Moving forward from the pistols, we're going to examine round number 15 here, where we're just trying to do some sort of a like slow default going on here for C9, or sorry, for 100 Thieves. I wanted to know your perspective into going into this round here, Mikes, if you remember this round.
Yeah, so I mean, it was kind of similar to the pistol round originally, where we were trying to get Will set up, breach chamber combos, pretty good in any concept that A main to bait out util, get him walked up. This was something we struggled with a lot this half, where C9 were just constantly denying us A main. They were willing to dump whatever type of util, paranoia, prower to keep that control. And then we just try to go into an A split because, like, okay, Dish is free. We can just split on this. These guys need to lurk up A main now. They're moving up, and then it's just mostly like a spacing thing after this point. I think these guys have a pretty good sight setup, crossfire-wise. You know, Leaf's just holding a nade out, ready for if Vanity hears anything or if he takes contact, he can nade them off. And then they get stalled out. A main guys are trying to come out. Spacing is a little bit wonky here, but we get the trade. And then the end of the round is nightmare fuel, but pretty decent spot so far.
Well, what are you laughing about here, James?
Just Mike's
He
comment.
knows.
Look at that molly, dude.
Yeah.
I remember I was like, you need to know how to molly these all perfectly from every angle. So that's my one impact I had. But that one molly.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
No. I think so. Looking back on just like a few of the losses I've experienced with my team on Fracture is like, I feel like these KO knives on the site get so much value.
They're
Like,
insane.
if there was no KO knife, like, it's probably more than a 2-for-2 for C9 here, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously we end up winning the round, but it could have been cleaner. So it's like, I think something I've just experienced a lot over time is the value of KO on this map when site hits. So if you're going to play a certain defensive standard, you have to take into consideration KO. Sure.
I think new Fracture, it loses a bit of its value, but like the more historical way of approaching the map where like everyone's mostly playing retake A and being able to just use that knife to hard clear sight is just toxic. It's so good on attack.
There is one specific round which the KO knife was pretty good, and we'll talk about it later. It's towards the tail end of the match that I thought was pretty cool of what you guys did for 100 Thieves, Mikes, that baited out a utility. But on that round, looking back, yes, indeed, it was a very nice snake bite from Curry. Secondly, he actually had a fucking amazing clutch where 100 Thieves kind of like threw that a bit by giving 3 individual 1v1s in the end. So I think that was, or he had another flick where I think it was also on the top side that just whiffed also that 1v1, right? So that was pretty cool to see that come back around here for C9.
It wasn't pretty cool.
I mean, like, everyone knows who made the mistake there. We don't need to say it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you know, the
Little
funny
things.
thing about the funny thing about a clutch is like it's only as good as what they give you, right? Like,
Yeah.
so good job by Curry. He capitalized on what they gave him.
Yep.
I think
So-
people always tend to focus on like the last mistake in the round too. So people will be like, "Oh, Austin lost that round," but no one will talk about like, "Okay, the spacing coming out of A main wasn't that good. Stellar taking that fight wasn't that good." There's a lot of things leading up to it that you put a player in a bad position.
For sure. Sure.
That's kind of like, "Oh, why didn't they win this?" Even though there's 1,000 mistakes you made before that point, that might be even more dreadful, I guess is a good word for it.
Like Derrek probably feels like he needs to peek a little because he knows Austin is low and in a spammable position, right? So it's like
contact as well, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like this weird, unraveling, and oh my god, man. So it's all about mental.
Not for you, James.
Yeah.
That's when you go, yeah. That's when you're happy for those fucking rounds, man. You're happy that you got that round turned around. But actually, I think you guys try to answer back right after in round number 16, Mikes, and I think it was actually a nice little execution that you got into the B site. I think more specifically just on based off of Derrek flash into a great spot into B main. So tell me a little bit about that execution to allow Austin to get into sight.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these types of rounds were just focused on gain orbs, 4 orbs on the map, so it's just kind of like ring around the rosy. I thought this was pretty decent push from them, even though they got double scanned, caught us off guard. And then, yeah, I mean, it's Peter, so we're just sending him in everywhere all the time. I thought obviously having limited util on eco, I think it's still such a dangerous part of this game. So Curry gets isolated because we used util for exec here. We have some stuff left over. And I feel like the stall from not only Derrek, but the smoke Bang puts down on top site is pretty good as well to delay space. You're playing close with pistols. Thought Bang was pretty unlucky to not kill Vanity here when we breach ult them going forward, but
yeah,
this is kind of one of the dogfight rounds James is talking about where some of it was good from us, but at a point it was just Derrek just won a ton of aim duels for us, just one-on-ones here. Like he's 30 HP, kills a guy, not looking at him. There's just a lot of stuff like that, so...
His mid-round presence of mind to just windmill slam the Rolling Thunder as soon as he got it as well was like round changing. Like if he
Overwatch thinking.
Yeah, like if he delays or hesitates for a second with that ulti, I'm not sure the round goes the way it goes. So
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I also think like outside of if it's not for that Rolling Thunder or thanks to that Rolling Thunder too, it's one of those rounds where despite you having better weaponry and also numbers, it's just hard to play that type of retake from spawn, play from spawn all the time as you see the retake is very difficult through these smoke streams.
Yes, sir. This is a prime example of it, and that's why I was thinking about it this morning, because in my opinion, like rewatching a game, there's like sometimes there's like big turning points. And I think this round is like on this map was like a pivotal, not necessarily a 180-degree turning point, but it was like this is a huge round to lose.
For sure.
You know?
For sure.
So
I mean, thankfully, Xeppaa, when you guys were retaking the site, still had full utility, right? So that you could actually know that the site was open and you had to play to fight for the extremities, retaking that B site. But then that Rolling Thunder just made everything very, very difficult to try to win a run, as you can see. But then we'll move on forward here to round number 18. We get to a point where, okay, deeper into the map, deeper into the game, C9 has like fucking 5 ultimates all ready to go to turn it around in your favor, at least for C9 here, James. But then you've also realized that at some point there is just mass chaos, and the 100 Thieves don't give a fuck about the ultimates that you guys have by pushing through sands.
yeah, this round's a huge dogfight. Honestly, like Xeppaa just goes hard in the paint. Like I don't know, like what else is there to say? Like.
It was at the plan here, Mike, to see to technically. I mean, you don't have a timeout at this point, right? And as an IGL, trying to call here for Stellar and understanding the comms, is it just like let's disrespect the ults, or what was the game plan? Just running into that.
It's just something fast that we like to throw in sometimes. The chamber obviously TP'd out, so that's kind of the thing we were talking about earlier. I think that space is open. Let's take it. We're a very explosive team on this map because that's how our comp plays. But yeah, I mean, C9 overall were pretty well set up to win that round, even if Xeppaa didn't pop off, because that's like the main takeaway. Obviously, he owned everyone coming out of A main and door. But you know, Leaf is taking good space towards Arcade. That's all open, so he's going to be set up for a flank. So there's a lot of good things going on outside of that. But yeah.
And forgive me, my peanut brain, not remembering all the rounds surrounding. This one specifically, I scribbled in Mitch aggro at the start. Is that something that you guys had worked on, James, or is that something that the players kind of just picked up, saying, "Hey, let's try and get this chamber into the fight early"?
Yeah, I mean, we're as a coaching staff, like we're always exploring all possible plays and presenting, and not all possible plays, but all possible seemingly high quality plays, right? So like he's obviously practiced this kind of a play a lot. Chamber's a huge utility sponge and it got huge value. So I mean, yeah, he didn't net a frag, but Chamber's effect is absolutely ridiculous on the game. So
And this is kind of where the peanut brain comes in, because I wasn't paying attention to whether or not Leaf was also playing that A main position in
No.
other rounds like Asuna was.
Mm.
Do you feel that the Raze gets more value, like playing on that B site versus playing off the Prowler Paranoia, or like, right? Because the Raze can boombot Paranoia, then paint shells if they're there, whereas the Prowler Paranoia, unless Mitch is pushing aggressively, ultimately just seems like information versus Asuna's early chip damage or frags that he was finding.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully some of the other people on here can help me come up with a calculation for value that you're asking. But and then also, even if
Game
I were
theory
to,
EV it.
yeah, even if I were to like answer that, like, how do you apply it? What does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to start the one with higher value there and put him there all the time? Is that good? What if they know he's there all the time? Like, so I think it's just about like knowing what you can do and then applying it accordingly. Because like, yes, Raze might in certain circumstances get different types of value there. He has more like directly damaging utility, decent, like the self-sufficiency factor is a little bit different. But Mitch goes for an extremely brazen peak and gets out alive like that. It's hard to like quantify, what's of higher value. So I think this harkens back to like having the most intelligent players possible, right? Because if I'm Leaf and I'm playing B, this round because Mitch is playing A halls, sure, our team has come up with a few setups where I might be in this conformation relative to my other agents, but I'm not necessarily going to like stand at the same box and hold the same angle and play by X protocols. Like, yes, we've gone over those things and Lottie frickin' da, but it's more about like being smart enough to make an optimal decision as the round goes on.
Yeah.
So
I also like that in that clip, Xeppaa throws a Nightfall, and that's round 18, if I'm not mistaken, and he's gonna have it back in like round 22. So that guy was like fucking farming those orbs and getting it ready ASAP. And then I think that's gonna be a pivotal round for us to look, of course, later on. But before we get into round 22, I want to talk about the defaults back into like round 20, because this starts off fairly slow as we're looking at 100 Thieves just trying to bait out some pivots here to C9 going left and right. But for you guys here, James, you don't really bite into the bullet of like wanting to cheat over rotation. And I want to bring that question over to you in terms of like being in the mind of a coach or in the minds of a player, understanding how the map currently evolves into a round. What are like the biggest tells from what type of agent that's going to make you think like, oh, maybe we should try to treat over the rotation to play the numbers in that sense? Like, is it a recon dart? Is it a boom bot? What are we looking out for tells?
is this for Mike? I forget.
For you first, James. Sorry, and then we could ask
Okay.
Mike's, yeah.
Ooh, that's a hard one. Bucketing it like that. I think based on what the other team does is like really important. Like if you've seen them do things, then when you see it again, it might mean more. But like if you're banking too much off reads, you could be totally wrong. Like remember in the first half, I was like, oh, it was really cool of Derrek on breach to stun a part of the map where they're not doing their big setup with the chamber baiting out and the Raze is sitting dish.
Yep.
Like you're not gonna be able to read that because then sometimes the breach is actually setting somebody up. So it's really hard to have hard reads in the game and they don't happen very often. It's more like small reads on the situation. Like your brain should be picking up like X amount of utility was used in these places around the map, so I kind of know I can do these things. That's how I would think about it.
Okay.
What do
Mike,
you
you had
think,
something
Mike?
to add? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't focus on too hard on tells unless someone is being like blatantly obvious with something like, I don't know, like I've noticed on your guys' VOD that with Fade sometimes it was the case where that was like the main part of the default, but again, you can't deal in absolutes all the time. Be like, okay, guys, if the Fade's there, that's always what you should focus on, and then this side's weak and all this stuff. So I think it's good to notice that if it's happening in a match consistently, like, oh, they're doing this consistently, we can exploit that. But I feel like too many teams I've found in the past try to focus on the anti-straying part too hard, and then you're not reacting to what's actually happening in front of you because you're focused on why isn't our plan working? Like they're not doing what I thought they would do. So I think that's just kind of like the balance act. Obviously, like I was saying earlier, you have to be confident in the stuff you do, but also be mindful of your opponent as well and respect them.
Big Noya.
So on this defensive side, for James, is there a spot on the map? Because in this one, you have two players playing a little more aggressively towards arcade. We saw it in that last round, same thing. Viper Raze kind of leaning out towards arcade. Is there kind of just for Cloud9 and that team comp a spot on the map on defense where you think to yourself, it is so incredibly important that we get this? Was that arcade for you guys, or somewhere else on the map?
I don't go into a game saying that, but I think the players kind of naturally know what's important in each situation. So here on this round, like most people like to get the B stairs orb because they can punish somebody punishing it. Like it's that one where it's like, all right, I feel pretty comfortable going for this one, especially if a breach. There's many nice ways of getting it with low risk. So we're like, all right, they're probably gonna go there. So why don't we just take arcade and do some lame setup here? Because like there's so many stupid little angles like this. You know, if you get all the way to bench here.
Yep.
So you get a nice little 2-for-1, and then we have Mitch being super annoying on bottom A site, right? Like
Yeah.
if we think they're gonna go B stairs, we might as well just like take something else, right? Like, all right, sure, you're gonna get your breach orb. That's great, cool. So
You guys
yeah,
had really good counter util here too.
I was gonna say,
on the guys
so
coming
sick.
out.
Yeah. Like a TP away, you force out the people trying to swing back into Mitch, and then you eat a dog, and then you get paranoid by Vanity, and then that's just a nice little flood, nice little retake protocol, right? So
all these players are so good, man. Like watching them play is an absolute treat.
Agreed. And I think that's why, and I didn't want to touch on that topic, and we won't. I just wanted to slide it in there. But like everybody that's been trying to like talk shit about Curry overall, right? Saying like, oh, like he's not he's not an upgrade to Zeta. This is a downgrade to Cloud9. Like all that shit, like out the fucking window, guys. Like you don't know what the hell's going on within the game in itself. And I mean, Curry definitely showed some skills in that matchup overall. But moving here into round 21. So after the spanking and the reply here that Mitch and company holding up the A site against 100 Thieves, you guys called a timeout here, Mikes. So of course, for step number 1, stop the momentum of C9 winning. It's fucking 10-10. You're at the brink of elimination during the LCQ. So how what's the conversation in here? Is it to calm the nerves, or is it to like try to scrabble into the tells that C9 are currently putting into their defender half?
I can't remember what game plan we came up with from this timeout, but I'm pretty sure I remember we talked about, okay, every time we do anything A main, they're dumping like Paranoia, at least a Prower, maybe if Leafs playing there, like a nade or something like that. So we felt like that was a good way to get a lot of util out of them early, so they wouldn't have it for like the late round, like that last round we just saw. And then I think the original call here was we were gonna like fake A main pressure, just run a fake off of this, bait out all that util, and then go the opposite way. But then they pull out just a full-on tree controller here, so then we just audibled out of it. But this is something that we would do sometimes, obviously, like sending Austin out, have the breach ult. Okay, we can just run a fake off this real quick. But yeah, then they run the tree control, so then you're trying to catch up to Peter, who's like the fastest player on planet Earth, probably. He does a pretty good job here of living as long as he does, I think. I mean, he gets dinged, gets spammed through the smoke, so it's pretty rough for him. I think Stellar played this round pretty perfect in terms of like the post plant to be really annoying to them, because we don't really have the sickest crossfire by any means. But he uses his util really intelligently here.
Agreed. And James, you're just looking at this with like your mouth open, being like, "Fuck, man!" Like it seems as though the game plan coming out for the timeout was worked out the correct way as you wanted. It seems like, but it just didn't pan out into the result that you wanted.
Yeah, the KO. I think what Mike said about Stellar. I mean, his KO ult timing was an absolute killer there. Like, imagine, imagine like that isn't there. There's definitely showstopper. Like, there's so much stuff happening there, and that just makes now we're just running into a 180-degree crossfire. This is really awesome. So yeah, that was a really good like reaction by them and really good space taking by Asuna. Like, yeah, he's 9 and 15, but like if he didn't do what he did that round, like there's no way they have that good of a chance into the round, in my opinion. Like he made the optimal play. He made a play that is like at least like a 2K with a dink in my eyes.
Yeah.
Like in terms of value or something like that. Like it's just like great reaction, sick round by everyone involved.
Yeah.
I remember Leaf, like after this round was typing, "Man, we're really tearing it up, Pete," or something, because they had like the same score line the entire game on Raze.
Yeah. I feel that was the case for both of those guys, and very similar to maybe even Victor playing with Optic back then, right on that neon. Like the main goal, try to fucking create that space, create a ruckus, stay alive, run all your utility, and let your team follow up because you're going to be miles ahead from the utility that you have. So I think that was a really nice way to play on yours end for 100Ts as well of Cloud9, of course, which is why we saw such a close game. But I think, as you mentioned, James, about this KO, the KO pick from Stellar being, a thorn on the side for C9 on the defense. I think the next round also kind of shows that a bit too. And I'm going to tag back to what you were saying as well, Mike's coming from the timeout, where you're saying, like they're using a lot of utility towards the A main site when we're actually trying to, up the pace a little bit, right? And what I liked about it was the beginning of the round, you guys just went with a full fake with at least to bait out the utility at the start with Derrek, Asuna, and even Stellar's knife from spawn into A hole. So talk me through that exec to bait out that Nightfall from C9.
Well, again, it's just kind of like if you see, it's just when you think about how people react, right? When we come out of that timeout, we didn't like do exactly what we wanted to do, right? Because we saw them taking full tree control. And it's like, well, fuck, we're not going B anymore. That would just be brain dead. So everyone go A. Peter's still alive. But it's just kind of like when you see Breach Ult coming out Sands and then Peter's there, it's like, okay, what likelihood are they going to bait at least one rotate, and get some opening there on the other side? Obviously, you have to think about, could they have a chamber op posted there? Yeah, but we feel like if we get this A main control, especially that late into a game when you're thinking about pressure and stuff like that, to bait out rotates and make people over rotate or just completely give the other site. But and then hopefully, like again, like I think Peter got tons of value there, living the amount of space we were able to actually get site, even though we took a pretty long time to rotate because we had to worry about the tree control. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just something too, where it's like like Sean called something out of a timeout, and then they did a pretty good counter to it, obviously, like not intentionally, I would assume, just because that's not something we would just call out of a timeout normally, but that's just what happens sometimes. Things just match up like that.
Yeah. And just in hindsight too, it seems as though it looks very similar to what you guys were calling on the timeout, was that fake A this time and pivot towards B. Is your knife here that Stellar threw from spawn side into that A holes actually forced the early TP away from Mitch, including a fault line and Boombot that also forced out an early Nightfall from C9. So I think in that sense that allowed for 100 Thieves to do that game plan that you guys are talking about in that timeout, Mikes.
Yeah, I think that knife is always just, like we always agreed, that was a pretty good value deal for Chambers. Obviously, it's not going to be consistent value all the time, but since we have that in our arsenal, might as well abuse it and figure out, just kind of narrow down where the chamber might be outside of that one area. Even if it doesn't tag him there, it's like, okay, what's the next part he's most likely to be at? And then this just turns into another like brawly shit show of a round, I mean, I thought C9 had a pretty good setup here. Leaf stalled for
Look
a
at this.
long time.
Look at this. Watch this. Look at that double.
Yeah,
Look at that double. Look at where the people are.
And then this kill. Yeah.
Oh my god, dude, that kill, that third kill he gets is the way it looked on my screen. I was like, holy moly, he just destroyed you, bro. Like you're standing, Vanity's like standing at an off-angle Jenny, and Derrek's just running up in the middle of the stairs and just stops on a dime. That was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
Nice life.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Go ahead,
Tanner,
Hans.
sorry.
I was just say, I think the last couple of rounds, James mentioned it kind of at the start in saying like not to take away from 100 Thieves, but the players on 100 Thieves really had some really standout moments. It started in the pistol for Stellar, and then like Bang and Derrek, it was 10-10 where Mike's had mentioned the Razes kind of messaging back and forth. And I think Leaf did the same exact thing, right? Not the greatest scoreline, not fragging out as a duelist, but doing his job. 100 Thieves just had a couple of rounds in those two that we just looked at where, you know, Derrek picked up that rifle in an eco round and killed 3 people. And so, yeah, it's like, it's nice to hear it, like how you guys think about it, and then actually see it really come to fruition that, like, Derrek
Yeah, it's really nice. I agree. It's really nice.
Feels great, I'm sure.
But at least for you can say like, damn, what we were doing was working. These guys just, you know, had a fucking great day.
No, it was a really hard fought match. Like
Hurry had
funny.
his like God hand round. I mean, it went both ways.
Yeah.
It's, like
it was a good match.
I was going to say, like, even if you replay that round again in that round 22, even though that utility was baited at the beginning on the A site and 100 Thieves pivoted towards B, just a chess match in general of how it went on that dogfight in B site, as you like to call it, James. Like, just trying to time the knife to actually not allow the showstopper to come out from Leaf on defense. Then you also have the smokes coming out from C9 to not allow 100 Thieves to scale back in after the flashes. There was just a lot of good on-the-fly utility that's being used from both of these teams. That is, it basically comes down to that. It's like those type of like small mistakes is easily capitalized overall, and that's the round changer. And even at this round, it's not a mistake really, right? You talked about that stray bullet that Vanity caught, and that was basically that turning point. So for those that, again, like me, that was looking at this composition in the beginning, I was like, oh man, these guys are playing double control and no flashes. This is going to be a very tough matchup to play. And I'm always like, okay, well, what can they do? Are they going to do like the PRX style of like nading into and satchelating into the A side, just planning for A for pulse plans and stuff like that too, which you have been doing a bit against other teams with this composition, right?
Yeah. But yeah, you said a lot of good stuff. So this knife here was massive.
Yeah.
The Brim ult, sectioning him off. This goes back to the theme of KO getting good value on this map if applied correctly. Yeah, I mean, dogfight round, players needing to make. Honestly, like that's. I would say at the top level, like what separates you as a player in a team is your ability to like make a good solution and keep updating it as the round progresses. Like, are your comms efficient enough to like keep pace with finding the optimal solution as it progresses?
Yeah.
And being able to hit the shot. Like, if you need to make a play, you should be able to make that play.
Yeah.
Based on your mechanics. And like that's what I tell the players if they're ever like changing their crosshair. I'm like, don't even worry about it. Just always attempt the correct play. Like always peek in the way that you should peek to play the round optimally. And like you can't control anything after that.
Yeah.
So
almost feels like that's something that you give a lot of credit to your team about in the past here when you were coaching C9 at this point, James. Is this also something that you echo for your team, Mikes, in terms of like the leveling up and building the round as a player as the round progresses based on your roster?
Yeah, I mean, Stellar is definitely a crosshair changer, so we don't have that solved, but he's working on it in the off season. I support it though, so I'm not much better. But I'd say in terms of like just talking throughout the round, I think that's a really important thing. One of my favorite quotes is from Greg Popovich, who's an NBA coach for people that are aware. But one of his things is like, I don't have 13 timeouts to tell you guys like what's going to happen mid-game. You know, we only have limited timeouts, so you guys got to talk at some point about what's happening and just figuring out what's the best thing you can think of at the moment to deal with what they're doing. It doesn't have to be the best thing, like the number one option. That's kind of what we're trying to think about as the rounds progress. Like, what are some of the number one, number two, number three things we could go to win the game, change things, make adjustments. But it's better to have a plan that everyone's on the same page with than no plan at all, right? So that's how we think about it generally too.
All right. Well,
Nice.
let's move on to the last round at least here, because this is where things are getting super important. Timeouts being called as well, James. So what's going on here? How do you make a comeback? And then the only notes that I have after that for this round 23 is Derrek util and aim owns, because it ended up being like a disadvantage situation that 100T capitalized on.
Yeah, so this ended up in a 2 versus 3 in favor of Cloud9 Esports. And I had a
No, you take
I
did you
definitely
take my notes? I wrote exactly that thing.
Yeah, I had a setup call into this round, obviously, because it's a broken buy, so I
Yeah.
gave some kind of advice, and we have a judge on the field, so the round is totally winnable. And what's hilarious about this round is like we've had a hero 3K from the same position in the other LCQ. I think it was against Optic or someone, and like they just ran by the guy in this orb corner and didn't clear him.
Yeah.
And like we probably wouldn't have won the game on that map had that not happened. We didn't win the game on this round, but it put us in a good situation on this round. So this was an interesting round. Really well played by 100 Thieves duo at the end in the 2v3. Extremely good micro play by these two right here. This is ridiculous. Watch this shit.
Yeah, I mean, at Mike's at this point, it's so much utilities left, and when the utility is there for Derrek, it's still winnable.
The number of 2vx's that Derrek basically just gifted his team this match is a little bit gross.
Yeah.
Like there was that one in the first half, the eco, where like he literally uses all of his util perfectly. Is it what it feels like?
Yeah, and it's really nice. Like, oh, go ahead, Tanner.
No, you go ahead, Mike's.
I was gonna say, like, when they were saying an A main there, both of Bang and Derrek just talking about, okay, let's wait this out, then we're gonna contact out. And Derek's like, I'm gonna hold a flash. We flash left side, and then we'll clear side together. Then obviously they see Leaf or hear him going into that corner. Okay, I'm gonna aftershock him. I'm gonna walk up. Just like the constant communication is so perfect in that call. That was really nice to hear. And then like in this scenario, it's like, okay, he's out sand, so it's 1, 2, 3, just double peek him. I feel like the communication between these guys is like, if you were to show a brand new team that was coming up in tier 3, tier 2, what good communication between teammates should be like, it'd be those last like 20, 30 seconds. Not the half clear A main, obviously, but I'll dock some points for that.
Also, the worst two guys to have alive in that situation, right? Bang and Derrek have had multiple standout performances on this map alone. So those two alive, I feel like that's 100 Thieves, one of their best options in 2vx situations to hang on to this map. But I think it's funny that you mentioned, James, back in I think it was round 15, where you said Curry has to know how to do this Molly lineup. And obviously, hindsight looking at this, had he shot that same Molly on that plant in under A, then this obviously goes way different, right? Because that 3-2-1 gets broken up. So yeah, this is like, it just goes back to the character, or the player decisions for Curry to kind of second guess himself and not shoot that Molly into that back corner.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think champions ever think woulda, coulda, shoulda and let it get to them. They just kind of like figure it out the next time.
Yeah.
You can't get in your head too much. Like everyone that's in the server here is such an insanely good player. Like they've put thousands of hours in and they're hypercritical of themselves. So it's not, I feel like if people think coaches are just like critical, that's like a huge like misunderstanding. Like I want to not make them feel bad, like it's never a goal to jam somebody up about things.
Yeah, don't kick them when they're down.
You're speaking about players being hypercritical. I think this is also like the match where we had a camera shot of Vanity just smashing his table, right? Or I can't remember which match it was, but you talk about them being hypercritical. They want to win these rounds, so when it doesn't go into the favor that they want. And of course, guys, Tony is not that way IRL. He's like the fucking kindest guy, but also very competitive. That's how we are.
He tweeted about that after it got clipped. He's like, the one time in my entire life I've smashed a deck during an official.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, as long as somebody's not doing that all the time, like it doesn't bother me at all. Like, yeah, he's passionate, like whatever. Like I've had situations on past teams where it is happening, and then another player will be like, "Hey, this kind of bothers me," like I don't think desk smashing in itself like is necessarily bad unless
Mhm.
you know it's happening at
Mhm.
a bad or alarming rate.
You're
Yeah.
breaking 5 desks per week.
Yeah, they're breaking mice, keyboards, and
Yeah.
shit.
Good thing they got good fucking tables there on the main stage.
Yeah.
But that said, what is this? Are we watching Sleep? Okay, I thought we were watching Sliggy
Oh,
playing some
there
harbor
it
and
is.
just
With the
fucking
Sliggy
getting There's a
analysis.
slam. There's a slam. Yeah. But yeah, competitive people,
Yeah.
right? Competitive people, and that's it. And you know what? After that round, 100 Thieves ended up winning that series and moving on and even winning the LCQ to go. So I mean that was a great match in itself. I was reminded that I casted that series. I know that it was a sick match that was casted. I always enjoy casting C9 in 100 Thieves as well. That said, too, though, I want to thank both of you guys actually for the time. This is a little bit lengthier than it usually goes into our segments, but man, we fucking appreciate your insights and all that, and I think people in the chat appreciate it as well. I see some people saying I'm gonna have to rewatch this segment like 5 times just to understand every single thing that you guys are talking about when you're actually talking about breaking down the round and seeing how every single piece of utility or timing is so important into the round. Good protocols. So I mean,
One
I'm
more for
dead.
the road.
I'm dead.
I
No,
want to go.
now you remind me.
What's
I
up?
have to meet up with Anderzz. So yeah, hit me up when we,
Yeah, for sure.
and I actually like what you were mentioning before as well, James, where you're saying like the mindset of a champion is not thinking about the coulda, shoulda, woulda. So I want to know, like, with your mindset being the champion yourself, what's next in store for you? What are you looking forward to now?
we'll all see in due time. But
Okay.
so we'll see in due time. I don't want to like ruin anything, but
Yeah.
I'm happy for every opportunity that I get, and I've learned in life that like even if you work hard, you don't always get what you deserve. So whenever I get an opportunity, like I feel very grateful.
Mhm.
So I think that's like a lesson
Yeah.
for everyone to think about is like count your blessings when you have them.
I definitely see that, man. I think I've been following you since like the CS:GO days, and we had a chance to like meet each other at LCQ. And you're a humbling person, and any team is lucky to have you. And I'm jealous of your fucking chiseled body. Mike's, what's next in store for you, brother?
Shut up.
What? You're handsome, bro. What can I say, dude?
I want to hear Mike talk.
Go ahead, Mike. I mean, it's
Jeez.
off season for you guys. What's going on with the 100 Thieves camp? Are you guys still on vacation? When are you guys getting back together?
Biggest thing is trying to figure out when we can start practice again. Obviously, I think everyone got bored pretty early on. Everyone wants to kind of make up for our champions' performance and stuff like that, get back on the grind. New teammate, obviously, to integrate. But yeah, practicing in NA is a little bit dead right now because obviously franchise teams are still figuring out their rosters. So Ascension teams can't figure out their rosters fully yet. So
Yeah.
those are the kind of things we're waiting on. But I always like off seasons and breaks as a time to reflect for myself on what I can do better and the things that I feel like we should stick with or improve on. So those are kind of the things that we're working a lot on. And then obviously moving to LA at some point will be quite the change overall for everyone, but that's kind of where we're at.
Awesome. I just also realized that every time you come on the show, Mike, you have a different headset. This time you have wireless earbuds. That's awesome. And then
Astute.
yeah. And then that said, also I want to go around the table as well to see what's next here for Anderzz, because we're in the off season for that too, for you as well.
Your guess is as good as mine, man. Still, so we're at a point now where I haven't worked directly with the VX roster since like mid-September.
Yep.
And so for me, it's mostly just sort of waiting in the wings to figure out what V1 as an organization is doing moving forward, as well as just looking for Ascension rosters, international rosters, whatever really comes my way. So
Awesome.
I mean, I am fully unrestricted at this point. Like, if orgs want to reach out, I'm all systems go.
Awesome. All the best to three of you guys in the off season and upcoming 2023. Anderzz, you have a date with James to talk about the protocols.
Oh yeah.
Tanner, I'm going to speak on our behalf because we'll see you next week on Valorant as well. We're live every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And mind you, those of you that enjoyed this segment, give a shout out to Daniel, our producer, and also let us know your comments of what you thought about that segment if you're currently watching this here on YouTube. at youtube.com/Valoranting. Big thank you to Twitch as well. And on Twitter, follow us there on Valoranting. And we'll see you next week. Peace.